Hey guys, so our next topic is going to be soil, found in chapter 12 of your ebook. Soil may not be the most exciting thing on the face of the planet, but it is very important to plants and different organisms found within the soil, so it is definitely worth talking about, especially regarding our phenomenon this week. Soil is a complex plant supporting system made up of disintegrated rock, remains and wastes of organisms, water, gases, nutrients, and microorganisms. We talked a little bit about this when we talked about biogeochemical cycles and how the nitrogen and phosphorus had to kind of cycle through the soil, and different types of bacteria in the soil would then convert it. So definitely those nutrients are going to be found there. Watering and different other important sources of nutrients are going to be found there as well. Soil is a renewable resource, but it takes a long time to occur. So it may take about 1,000 years for 1 inch of topsoil to reform. So if you think about it, 1,000 years just for 1 inch, it does happen to reoccur, but it takes a long time for that to happen. So not the best to kind of ruin your soil, because it's going to take a long time for it to come back to having those nutrients. If we deplete the nutrients in the soil, it not only affects us but future generations. So because it takes such a long time for it to come back, if we or our generation ruins the soil, it's not only going to hurt us now in the present, but it's also going to hurt future generations coming down the line. So it's super important that we take care of our soil. That way we don't only harm ourselves, but we don't harm people in the future. Climate, organisms, landforms, parent material, and time are all different factors that affect soil formation. So all these different things can affect how soil occurs, how it is made, and how it will form over time. Parent material is just the base geological material. So it is whatever is laid down at the bottom. Different examples of this could be lava rock, sand dunes. If you're near a river, it's going to be softer material, so it can change based on where you are located. But it's whatever the main base geological material is, that's usually called the parent material. Different processes of soil formation are weathering, deposition, and decomposition. All right, all of these things can change how your soil is and the different characteristics of it, which we will talk about soon. All of these processes will add nutrients to soil and make soil more fertile or less fertile. So depending on which of these processes are happening and what those processes are doing, it's either going to make your soil more fertile for plants or less fertile. Soil has many different layers, and they are called horizons. So if you looked at the picture there, you can see the 6 different horizons. The simplest way to organize these horizons is by just using horizons A, B, and C. That's, if you were to simplify it, that's kind of the different layers that you would see, A, B, and C. If you look there at horizon A, you can see topsoil. Topsoil is what we mentioned in the previous slide, that it would take 1,000 years for 1 inch of that layer, A horizon, in order to be made. So if you think about just 1 inch of that top layer would take 1,000 years, it's going to take a long time for this good soil to cycle back through. Typically, however, scientists usually subdivide these categories into 6 different horizons. So these are the 6 different horizons. O horizon is just litter layer, so that's going to be like the very top of the surface, where your leaf litter is typically, which is where decomposition is going to be happening most of the time. Then it goes down to A horizon, which is your topsoil, which is usually what you think about when you think about soil. It's going to be that A horizon. E horizon is the leaching layer, so that's when water starts carrying nutrients down or up based on capillary action. That's usually going to be happening through that layer. Then you have B horizon, which is subsoil, C horizon, which is weathered or parent material, right? We talked about that parent material being the base geological layer. And then R horizon is just that parent material. So I just wanted to, you don't need to remember all of these different layers or horizons. I just wanted to show you that there is much more to soil than just what is happening and what you think about when you think about soil. So normally when you think about it, you're just thinking about that A horizon, which is that topsoil layer. All right, soil has different colors, textures, structures, and pH. So I wasn't going to go through every single detail about soil because we don't have all the time in the world, but usually the darker the color, the more rich the soil is. The lighter the color, the less rich it is. So if you have really dark soil, that usually means that your soil is nutrient rich. There's different textures, so you know clay, silt, then you have sand, all based on how fine your particles are. So super fine, and then you can go all the way up to no fine. It all depends on how much water and air is allowed in through the cracks in between the particles. There's different structures, and then of course you have pH, which is found on the pH scale of 0 to 14. So you can have acidic soil, you can have basic soil. That matters because different plants prefer different pHs, and some plants can actually change color based on what the acidity or basicity of the soil is. So it's super important that, you know, landscapers would keep track of pH of soil in order to grow certain types of plants. Farmers would keep track of pH because it's important that they know what the pH of their soil is so that the crops grow most efficiently, and that sort of thing. So all these different colors, textures, structures, and pH impact plants and impact how well they're going to grow in a particular area. All of these different properties provide different information regarding the nutrients found in the soil. So like I said, different colors matter, and they tell you different things about the soil. Different textures are going to tell you how easy certain plants are going to be able to grow, how fertile the soil is, right? It's different plants are going to be able to grow in sandy contexts rather than silt or clay. So all this information matters when you're determining different properties about it. It gives you different information about the nutrients that you're going to find in that soil, and basically how plants are going to be able to manipulate those nutrients in order to grow efficiently. Soil degradation, the deterioration of the soil characteristics needed for plant growth. So anytime you have a breakdown of those characteristics or nutrients needed for plant growth, that's called soil degradation. This can occur due to human activities, as always, or naturally due to ecosystem changes. So sometimes there are just things that happen naturally that can cause soil degradation. One example of a naturally occurring one would be just a flood happening in a certain area, and because of that flood happening, it's going to erode a lot of soil, moving a lot of the topsoil out and moving a lot of the nutrients to a different area. So you could get soil degradation that way, but most of the time it's due to human activities. Whether we built a dam and now there's no nutrients being carried downriver, or we just wipe out an area and start to build, or we wipe out an area to farm. All of these different things are going to change the effectiveness of that soil. So one of the ways that soil can be degraded is erosion. So it helps to create soil because it brings in nutrients from other areas. So it can be helpful to one area, but if it's helpful to one area, it's going to be harmful to another area because it's taking the nutrients from one area to another. So it's going to take over that top layer of soil and erode it. So the nutrients are then going to be put into the water. It's going to be carried to a different area and then dumped off in that other area. So let's say if we had area A, right? Area A would be losing nutrients as it is eroded, and area B would be gaining. So it would be forming in area B and removing it from area A. So it can be good, but it can also be bad. It also causes a problem when it happens faster than the soil can be replaced. So if you have a lot of erosion in an area, obviously if it takes a long time for that soil to be replaced with good nutrients, and you have erosion happening much faster at a faster rate than it's being put back, obviously that's a problem. Your nutrients aren't being refilled. Farmers have come up with ways to prevent erosion from happening near their farms, based on how they structure their land and their crops. I have a couple pictures here for you. So the first one is called terracing. Basically, they build their land in a way that their erosion would be caught on the next level. That way they don't lose it all as it erodes away down their farm. The second one is contour farming. All right, this is where they basically build their crops to kind of mirror how the land is laid out. So they basically have higher levels of elevation up here, and then if they were to see any erosion, it would be caught by this next level. All right, and they basically copy how the land is formatted so that they don't lose a lot of their soil and erosion. Overgrazing is another form of soil degradation. Overgrazing is when you have too many animals that are eating too much plant cover. So if you had animals naturally grazing in an area, right, and they were eating too many plants than are growing back, obviously you're going to run out of plant cover. Anytime that you're running out of plant cover, this is going to lead to a few issues. Your soil is going to be more vulnerable to erosion because there's no plant roots that are holding that soil in place. So now if you had a big rainstorm and you don't have any plants there holding it down, obviously it's going to be much easier to be washed away. The other thing that it does is it allows invasive weeds to grow. So anytime that you remove an entire area from plant cover, you're now opening that area to any kind of plant to grow. And any type of invasive weed that is more efficient at growing faster or growing bigger or more adapted to the environment, it's going to grow better, and then you're not going to get the same plant cover that was once there if it's all removed at once. And the last thing it does is it decreases pores for water and air. So it's going to remove these extra spaces for water and air, right? Obviously not helping any nutrients get into your soil. One way that farmers try to kind of prevent this is they have ranchers determine the carrying capacity of livestock. Remember, we talked about carrying capacity way back when we talked about population. So carrying capacity is the maximum amount of organisms that you can have in an area that can meet its needs. So they have to determine what the carrying capacity is. So basically determine how many organisms of livestock you can have in a certain area before you would kind of experience this overgrazing. Another way to kind of prevent this is to have people enforce grazing limits on publicly owned land. So to just make sure that, there's not too many organisms grazing on particular land that the government owns. That way they can at least prevent it in specific areas that they have control over.